I am back for some more gel prints with my Dorothy stencils from Joggles that Elizabeth St. Hilaire created recently in her May release. And so I always like to get started with a handful of plain backgrounds. So I will put my white acrylic paint down on the gel plate, and I'll usually mix in some iridescent pearl to go along with. Then I'll use the Red Baron from Speedball to press the paper down onto the gel plate so that I can pick up the background. And I'll repeat this as many times as I think I need to. This time I think I probably made 6, and so you see a nice kind of glow there. And now I'm ready for some gold. So I have pearl gold and iridescent gold. The pearl gold is from Holbein, and the iridescent gold is a golden color. And I thought I'd mix them just so that I can get a feel for the difference between the two golds and see how it looks. And so it's always good to swirl the paint around to get it to mix really well and to keep you from having too many blotches on the plate. Even though you'll use stencils, you still can get areas on the plate that have heavier deposits of that acrylic paint. So I'm going to use Spotty Dotty first, and you can see that has a really nice look with some uniform dots. Dressy Dorothy is the other stencil that I'm going to use, and it has the dots kind of in lines almost to make it look a little dressier. So we'll start by putting the gold dots from Spotty Dotty stencil on the pearl backgrounds. So it's going to look really pretty with a gold shimmer on top of the pearlescent white. Makes a very nice, shiny, kind of dressy look. And so when you have this kind of a stencil with the bigger holes, it's good to go ahead and take your time and make sure that you press down on the paper. I'm using mixed media paper again because I want to be able to feel through the paper. You could use that print by itself for a greeting card. It is so pretty. And now I'm going to get another print just by lifting up the stencil and picking up the rest of the paint that was left behind on the plate. So I'll make sure to smooth it out with my Red Baron so that I can pick up all of that pretty paint. And wow, that is a really neat design. So this is a process that I'll go ahead and repeat a few times so that I can get the first layer of polka dots onto my prints using the gold. I have a layer of gold on each of the prints that I've started with, and next I'm going to pull a really vibrant color by Holbein, Luminous Violet. I haven't really played with it a lot, and I'm excited. I'm going to mix in Iridescent Pearl with it, and this is the fine, so it's not going to be as gritty as the coarse would be. So I'll mix that in to lighten up the luminous violet, and you can see that how it took the color down just a notch. And then I'm going to take my second stencil and lay it on top of my gel plate and grab my print that already has the gold and the background on it, and I'm going in for my third layer. And so this is going to put little luminous violet dots on top of the gold and pearl colors to make a really nice, pretty print. Because these dots are a little bit smaller, again, it's important to take your time and make sure that you're squishing as much paint through the dots as possible, and you can lift it up with one hand while holding it in place with the other hand to see if you have gotten enough of that print. And so now I'm going to pick up the rest of the paint that was left behind, and it's going to give me really good coverage on top of that gold print. So you'll see a lot of the luminous violet coming through after I lift this page up. Here we go. But you do still get some of that gold while the luminous violet does pretty much overpower the print. So I'm going to keep doing this, and I decide now, of course, I've got to get my texture in there. You know how I love texture. So I've switched over from the Iridescent Pearl Fine to the Iridescent Pearl Coarse so that we can really have some fun. And I'm mixing that in. It doesn't change the color compared to the fine, but it does give you quite a bit more texture, which is awesome when you're using it for backgrounds on greeting cards that people are going to hold in their hands. So they'll really feel that great texture, and they'll be able to tell it's one of a kind. So here I go again, just pressing it down and doing yet another combination. So you can see that on the first time I pulled on the background of the dots, but this time I'm pulling the small dots on top of the bigger gold dots. So it's a different combination than the one that I did the first time. So you'll get to see, and you can see the other one laying off to the side, it makes a different look, which is why gel printing is so much fun, because you can really get a million different kinds of combinations. I can tell there's some paint left behind, so I'm just grabbing a sheet of deli paper. It's used. You can see it has a ton of other paint on it. And I'm just picking up some extra paint that was left behind so that when I lift my stencil up and I go to pick up the rest of the paint from the gel print, I'm getting some nice clean dots. That's the goal, for the dots to really show up from the background. So this time I have background and background print. So you'll see the gold and the luminous violet together that way. It's a really cool look. So then I decide I really wanted to get some different color combinations in there. So I'm going for black. I have lamp black, and then my black Mica Flake, which is even more texture than the pearl, the coarse pearl. So I'll use a palette knife to kind of dig in there and get that onto my gel plate. But I do want it to look black, so that's why I have that great lamp black from Holbein. And I'll mix those together. I really didn't bother cleaning off my brayer too much because I knew the black would just take over. That lamp black is really good for that. So here we go, just mixing it up. And I wanted to get a more dramatic look. So I invited the black. And so you see, look, I have the pink facing up. Why would I do that? Well, I kind of like the dirty look that you get, or maybe just kind of like an imprint or an impression from the side of the stencil that's dirty. So I do that on purpose sometimes. Sometimes it works out great and it looks really cool, and sometimes it doesn't. So, I would advise you just to experiment as you are playing around with your stencils, but that's gonna cause me to get some pink on this print, some violet on the print that I would not have gotten otherwise. So we have black, gold, and violet on the same print. So again, just grabbing that piece of deli paper and picking up some excess paint that's left over behind on the press. And then I always have a stack of white paper next to me because sometimes I don't want to layer and I see that I've got a lot of black paint left over and I really just kind of want to pick it up by itself because I think that's going to make a different cool background. There's never too much black and white printing that you can do. The monochromatic look is awesome and I can envision using that for lots of really neat things. So I'm going to go at it again. I need a little bit more paint. So I'll add that to the plate and continue to do some more layering with that second stencil, adding a little bit more of the black mica flake. And that is the small black mica flake. As much as I like texture, I have not gotten into the large flakes yet when it comes to the mica. So maybe that'll be a future video. So here I go again, and I flipped my stencil again. So I'm putting the black side up. That's dangerous. That's going to be messy. But I think that it will kind of give me a little bit more of a grungy look. And my first prints were really pretty. And I like pretty, but I also like to see a little bit more dynamic look going on. So as I pull it up, I'm starting to see, just when I peeked at that corner, I could see that it really did pick up some of that paint left over on the stencil. So it almost gives a bit of a shadowy look and makes it look less like a uniform stencil, but also a little bit more of a shadow. And I think that's kind of neat. And again, I pick white paper, just plain paper to pick up the black background because I know there's a lot of paint left and there would be a lot of things I can do with just a monochromatic print. So I'll use the Red Baron and smooth it out so that I can lift as much of that paint as possible. So then I'm not done yet. I've made a lot of really beautiful prints, but I think that I would like to go back to the luminous violet and some of that fine iridescent pearl. I'm going to clean off my brayer. I probably should have done a better job. I just kind of halfway cleaned it off. And then I'm going to mix it up, and this gives me kind of a neat dark look. And so darker violet, and then I'll take the same stencil, and this time I decide I just want a little bit of it on. So I go ahead and pick up the dots with my first print. And that is on top of the one that was all black. So I've added some violet on top of the black. And now I'm thinking, okay, I've got that other black one and I want to add some violet to that too. So hey, that looks really neat. So I'm going to go at it again. My brayer is a little bit cleaner this time, so it won't be quite as grungy looking of a violet, but a little bit dark still because the black is, you really have to wash it off if you want it to go away, but I didn't want it to go away. And then we're going to add some of that violet to the black. So again, same stencil, just reversing the order that I'm layering, and you get a ton of different dynamic prints when you do things like this. So just making sure I'm getting my fingers in there so that I can pick up some of that violet, and that looks really cool. Now here's where I know that I want to add some dimension to the rest of my prints. And so I grabbed one of the black and gold only prints and I decided to just pick up a corner. And I think, okay, that looks pretty cool. So I picked up another area and I'm just lightly touching the gel press in a certain area, not pressing the piece of paper down on the whole thing. So there I just kind of lightly wiped my hand down the side, and that allowed me to pick up some additional layering and texture. And this is kind of fun. There's no science to it. You just pick up some extra texture and color as you go along. And then when you're ready, when you think you've picked up enough, you can press the whole page down and pick the rest of it up. So I really do enjoy that process to help add some dimension and layering to some prints that maybe look a little bit boring or a little bit, plain. So now I've let what's left over on the gel press dry, and it's time to clean it up. And so I'll do that by adding a thin layer of plain white. I just went with plain acrylic white this time. And I'm smoothing out a layer. You don't want this to be too thick. And if you're going to do this, which I highly recommend, by the way, my favorite prints come from this method, go ahead and smooth it out real thin. And if you need to wipe some of it off on the side, go ahead. because if you have chunky paint, it won't work. So then I'm going to take just a fresh piece of paper and I'm going to take my time and really smooth it out so I can pick up hopefully as much paint as possible. Nirvana is when you get all of that paint to come up all at once. And sometimes that happens and sometimes it doesn't. And so you can go at it a couple times if you need to. But this is pretty darn good. And wow, look how cool that is. It's like the story of all of the prints that came before it. And I know that'll probably end up being my favorite of all of the greeting cards that I'll make with these. So here we are off to my cutting board. I thoroughly enjoy cutting down the prints that I make into rectangles. I cut off all the excess edges and then I'll stack them up and use them for later. And I really that's probably one of my favorite parts of the process. So here we go. I'll show you what I came up with. So 2 stencils, really 3 colors and some mediums mixed in, and all of this different depth and dimension that I will then even cut smaller and probably get, I don't know, maybe like 25 to 30 greeting cards out of all of these prints, if not more, depending on what size I decide to do. The ones that have a lot of black on them are kind of moody. I could see using those for, Halloween or even sympathy cards. And then there's my final cleanup there. I hope you enjoyed. Please subscribe to my channel and have a great day.